So it's been over 1 month since Redfall's disastrous launch, whereupon a lot of people, including critics, gamers, and video game journalists like ApoAlaia, basically gave up on it.
Xbox places, but I am not joking when I say I think this is one of the worst AAA releases I have ever played. I know that sounds hyperbolic. I know it's like a YouTube click. Cyberpunk was very glitchy, but the core game was very solid. I can't find anything redeeming about Redfall. Not in any category of the game. The main thing that's driving me to quit is just how bad it feels to play, like physically feels.
Even I gave Redfall quite a low rating, though looking at what other reviewers gave it, my 4 out of 10 rating seemed to be more generous in comparison. Since then, nothing has really happened much for Redfall in terms of critical features or issues being brought to the fore or resolved in a timely manner. As expected, after its flop and failure to retain the long-term interest of a diverse array of audiences, Redfall has essentially fallen into obscurity, and no one's really talking much about it. Perhaps that's because an even worse AAA game called Golem has recently eclipsed Redfall as the worst game of the year. Since then, so many people have speculated as to who or what is to blame. Was it Microsoft? Was it Arkane Austin? Was it Arkane Lyon not being there? Was it because of the vampires? Who knows? Even Phil Spencer himself had to respond to the miserable ratings of Redfall and acknowledge them. In early June, however, Jason Schreier from Bloomberg News wrote a rather eye-opening piece called Inside the Making of Redfall, Xbox's latest misfire. That actually goes into details that he could get that indicate Redfall may have been doomed inevitably from the very start of its development. And I'm going to actually go over these details with you and expand on a couple things. So the article kind of goes over the summary of what Redfall is, what Arkane Studios has accomplished in terms of its reputation. And of course, we have a report on Xbox boss Phil Spencer saying, oh, you know, the review scores are definitely lower than what we would have thought we would get internally, which is basically PR speak for, well, it may not be too bad to play, guys, you know. But apparently to the makers of Redfall, the people making the game, the mediocre reception was no big surprise. The project suffered from unclear direction, meaning lack of leadership, frequent attrition, meaning people were quitting left and right, and a perennial lack of staff, which is a result of people quitting left and right. According to more than a dozen people who worked on the game, and these people are speaking anonymously because they're not allowed to discuss it publicly. And an official spokesperson for Redfall's publisher, Bethesda Softworks, declined to comment. So, in 2018, ZeniMax, or ZeniMax Media, which basically is the large conglomerate that owns all these studios and subsidiaries, including Bethesda Studios, including ZeniMax Online Studios, Arkane Studios, and so on, was basically telling everybody, hey guys, what if we could make more money? And they probably looked at the success, the massive financial success of The Elder Scrolls Online, or even other games like Overwatch and Fortnite, and said, what if we could make money from microtransactions? And at this point during Redfall's development, that idea was seeded into the development in one way or another. And at this time as well, games like Fallout, Doom, and Wolfenstein would also have some sort of microtransaction or some sort of live service component that players could get. Now, at Arkane's headquarters in Austin, Harvey Smith and Ricardo Bayer were tapped to serve as co-directors of Redfall. Now, this is where things seem to go wrong. Okay? Developers under Smith and Bayer said that the two leads were outwardly excited, but as the project progressed, failed to provide clear direction. Which means anyone who's worked with bad leaders or just a lack of direction under leaders will tell you that's really bad. Staff members said that over time, they grew frustrated with management's frequently shifting references to other games, such as Far Cry and Borderlands. So they're just giving their workers all these different concepts and ideas, but not steering them in a clear direction for what the game is. And this kind of explains why Redfall felt like it tried to do everything. It tried to do Dishonored. It tried to do a first-person shooter. It tried to do Left 4 Dead. It tried to do lore. I mean, it just felt like a patchwork, a really messy patchwork of different core concepts borrowed from many other games and franchises. And that's one thing I noted during my review, that it doesn't feel finished, perhaps because it doesn't have a clear direction. And lo and behold, behind the scenes, they did not have a clear direction. And one thing I'm going to note here is Arcane Studios, and this is going to be really important later at the end of the video, is known for games called immersive sims or single-player experience, like Dishonored. So just keep that in mind. Arcane was also perpetually understaffed. The studio's Austin office employed less than 100 people, okay? And that may be sufficient for perhaps a single-player game like Prey, Jason Schreier notes, but not enough to compete with actual live service multiplayer companies or games like Fortnite and Epic Games, right? Destiny and Bungie and so forth. Even additional support, and this is where they even call it cavalry, even additional support from ZeniMax's Wisconsin-based Roundhouse Studios and other outsourcing places couldn't fill those gaps. As a result of lack of leadership, just the workload potentially, morale at Arcane suffered. Veteran workers who weren't interested in developing a multiplayer game left in droves. So these are the same people that worked on other Arcane games. By the end of Redfall's development, 70%, roughly 70% of the Austin staff who had worked on Prey would no longer be at the company. Okay? Which means 30% of the people who worked on Prey stayed, perhaps, and the other 70% just left. And of course, and this is also a well-known fact, at least if you look into the video game industry, ZeniMax does have a reputation, as Jason Schreier notes, for paying lower than average salaries. And I mean, who's going to work more at this point? Because you have to realize the workload has become more with less people for less. And of course, people didn't. And they had a lot of issues filling their staff. And then something happened that we all, of course, remember. In 2020, Microsoft purchased ZeniMax and all its subsidiaries, all its IPs, all its projects for $7.5 billion. And this is a point where a lot of people, particularly gamers, thought, well, what if Microsoft messes up the games or studios I love, their work? What if they interfere too much? And I think Microsoft definitely took heed of that and said, we'll be hands-off. And they were pretty hands-off. Unfortunately, though, in this case, it might have been better if Microsoft did actually interfere, because apparently some staff at Arcane hoped that Microsoft might cancel Redfall, okay? Or better yet, let them reboot it as a single-player game. Instead, Microsoft said, do your own thing. Use your autonomy, okay? And it just gets worse. Okay. During the final frantic months, the remaining Arcane staff found themselves stretched thin. If you remember, it was supposed to come out during Halloween of 2022. Then they delayed it and pushed it back to Q1 of this year. And then they pushed back again to May 2nd, 2023, when it launched. All right. And this is the craziest part to me, like absolutely the craziest part to me. The leadership failed again at the end, saying, hey guys, the game will get exponentially better once the final art is implemented and the bugs are fixed. Although, they didn't really deliver on perhaps the latter, promising that arcane magic, and I shit you not, quote unquote around arcane magic, would manifest at the last minute as it had with previous games. Just kind of absorb that. Like, the executives, the leadership just told the staff, hey, we know we did a lousy job of directing you guys. We did a lousy job of, filling the positions that needed to be filled. We did a lousy job with just basically everything from start to finish. But, we're Arcane Studios. Maybe something will happen that happened for us with our other successful games that we did not do this exact process for. So that's crazy to me. And in the end, of course, as everyone knows watching this video, Redfall never coalesced. Okay. And some people who played the game, who tested the game in 2021, 2 years before launched, were shocked to see how little ultimately changed, which means what happened with QA? What happened with, you know, the various departments that work on the different aspects of the game? Did they just say, okay, we're done, let's ship it? Or what was it? So I guess in the end here, we basically need to essentially blame the leadership for what happened with Redfall. The forcing, I guess, not forcing, or rather perhaps pressure, peer pressure to do a live service game. No, you don't have to do a live service game. You don't have to put microtransactions in to make a game great. I don't think these people really understand that at all. And it just more and more shows gamers that, you know, despite the name, despite the reputation, despite the trust we've built with you over the years, over these amazing, you know, basically art, right? Art pieces of games, like, we can't really trust you to the point that we're going to pre-order anything. It's why, you know, with a lot of these AAA games coming out, people are not pre-ordering. People are just kind of waiting to see what's going to happen. It seems to be very rare nowadays that any AAA game that doesn't come from Japan or certain studios still in America are working properly when they launch, or even fleshed out properly when they launch, and people are tired of it. And it's crazy to me that for the first 3 years, apparently, Redfall had a significant microtransaction plan in place, and then they just scrapped it. So even that didn't go through because they couldn't fit it in. Recently, Microsoft has said that Arcane will continue working to improve Redfall. And this is the part where I don't really know if they can improve it. Like, I honestly don't know if they can improve it in a timely manner to make it relevant, to make people go back to it, essentially. I mean, there's so many games coming out, and this is the same problem a lot of games are going to be facing, a lot of older games are going to be facing, with Starfield, with Final Fantasy 16, with Diablo 4, and all these, Zelda, all these other games coming out. It's kind of too late, perhaps. But yeah, that's really it. That's the details, the shocking details, I might add, as to why Redfall flopped, and perhaps why it was inevitable from the very start that it would just be doomed. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below, and thanks for watching.